Hello, ELED 3111, and welcome to Module 2. This is Dr. Biker. I hope you are all doing well. So I wanted to start this module by explaining just an overview of what you'll be doing as part of Module 2. We're going to be investigating what is backwards design as an instructional pedagogy. We will talk about how to write strong objective statements. And then I'm preparing you for the direct instruction lesson plan assignment. So I'll have some more to say about direct instruction as well as culturally responsive teaching and instructional design. The assignments that are part of this module include the direct instruction lesson plan, which is due by 11:59 p.m. Monday, July 19. You're welcome to turn it in early. And just like with anything else, if you want to finish the course early, that's fine by me. The other thing that you'll be doing is the indirect instruction 5E lesson plan check-in. So you'll be writing an indirect instruction lesson plan as well. And the check-in provides the description of that indirect lesson plan assignment, as well as a model for you to look at. And the check-in just provides you an opportunity to say that you've read through the assignment, and if you have any questions, that's the forum to put your questions in. All right, so let's get started. So I have a question for you to begin. This is an inquiry question. When it comes to instructional design and lesson planning, what do you think it is that teachers most likely start with? What do they often think about? Just take a couple seconds to think about that question. And if in your just reflecting on this question, you thought about the word activities, you would be correct. Usually teachers, especially beginning teachers, think about the activities they want the kids to do, and that's usually the first thing. But backwards design says that's not the place to start. Activities actually come at the end, where the first place that you want to start with any kind of instructional design is with the desired results, which means what are the big ideas and skills you want to have the students develop. And you can find those big ideas and skills in the state standard document, like in North Carolina, the North Carolina standards. And then the next step is to write a strong objective statement related to the standard. So you find alignment with the objective and the standard. And by writing a strong objective statement, you're actually providing the evidence and what it is, what will be the activity for the lesson? How will you assess the students? So objectives inform assessment. After you have decided what it is that the standard that you're focusing on, which is the outcome, the result of the lesson, and then you have written a strong objective statement aligned to that standard to help you know how you're going to assess. Then at the very end actually comes the learning experiences and the instruction. That's when you plan out the activities, what's going to be the activity for the lesson. So activities come when out of a strong alignment between the standard, your objective statement, and the assessment. All right. So as part of this module, you'll be reading about this understanding by design, which has been nicknamed backwards design. You'll be reading some text related to this, this pedagogical framework. And I just have included some basic figures here to kind of give you an idea of what we mean by backwards design. I kind of just explained it, but again, it's just that first step is identifying the desired results. You find those results from the state standards and by writing strong objective statements, then determining the acceptable evidence. Again, your objectives inform your assessment there. And then the final part is actually planning out the content and the activities of the lesson. And that's what we mean by backwards design. And it's the approach that we'll be taking in terms of instructional design for this course. Now, it's really key, a key part of instructional design is writing strong objective statements. You've heard me probably say this before, you will hear this, but this is definitely a big idea of this course in terms of instructional design. Strong action verbs drive strong lesson plans. And when you write your objective verbs, you want to use strong action verbs. Again, the reason why is that strong action verbs are measurable. There's something that you can see the students do. So for example, strong action verbs would include analyzing a text. Maybe they use a graphic organizer to analyze a text, for example. Explaining, creating something, describing, etc. These are strong action verbs because you can actually see your children or your students do it. Do not, I repeat and write this down, do not use weak generic verbs like understand, like know, comprehend. You'll find that this is a big pet peeve of mine. So just avoid using these weak generic verbs. Why? They're not measurable verbs. You can't actually see a child understand. You can't get into their head to see that. So use strong action verbs that are measurable and that you can actually see the students do this. And I have provided a list of strong action verbs on our Canvas website or Canvas in this module that are aligned to Bloom's taxonomy. So please make sure you use that handout if you're lost or need some help with what are strong action verbs. Another key part of this module is I provided a mini lesson for you that you'll be reading through about writing objective statements. So in objective statements includes 3 features. You can see them here. The performance, what you want the students to be able to do. The conditions, which are basically the details about how the students will do this, if they'll do it independently or in a group. And then the criteria. The criteria is how do you know that they'll be proficient on what it is that they're going to be doing as part of the lesson. All right, so let's just look at how you'll be writing your objective statements. You'll be including these 3 features, and I've included an example here below, and I've highlighted this for you. So the yellow highlight is the performance. Students will be able to analyze. Notice the really strong, analyze is a strong action verb. I recommend that you use it. It's one of the best ones to use. We'll be able to analyze historical events. That's the performance. The condition is that they will be doing this independently. They'll be independently creating a timeline. Again, creating is a strong action verb there, but this is the condition. How will they do it? They'll do it independently. And then the criteria is this. They must have 4 of the 5 historical events on their timeline in the correct order and chronology. So these are the 3 features of objective statements. And when you're writing your objectives in this course, I want you to include those 3 features. Okay? Let's go next. Another part of the direct instruction lesson plan and all the lesson plans that you'll be creating in this course is this 21st century learning skills. So I want to just take a brief moment to explain what I mean by that. So the 21st century skills come from the Partnership for 21st Century Learning. We've identified 5 skills, or the Partnership for 21st Century Learning have identified 5 skills that they believe are critically important for students to achieve as part of moving into careers in the 21st century. Okay, so in this century, a lot of the careers and jobs that are being developed or already developed rely on strong collaborative skills, excellent communication, being able to communicate both in written and verbal ways, creativity, critical thinking, being able to critically think about and analyze the information that they're receiving, and then problem solving. So in your lesson planning for this course, I'm going to have you highlight at least 2 of these 5 21st century learning skills that are part of your lesson. Now, I'll just give you a little hint. Almost every single lesson that you do has a way that kids communicate to you about something. So communication is a pretty much an easy one to highlight. But there might be also, like, for example, in the example I provided for you about the timeline, students will be creating a timeline. There's a creativity element to that. If they're working in groups at all, collaboration. If they're having to solve a problem or there's a certain thing that they're working on solving, then you have problem solving. So again, in each of the lesson plans for this course, you will be highlighting at least 2 of these 5 21st century learning skills. Now, I want to explain, just provide a little bit of background for you about direct instruction. So direct instruction is a way of instructional design that comes to us from Dr. Madeline Hunter, who was a teacher at University Elementary School in Los Angeles, and also a professor at UCLA. She's actually considered one of the 100 most influential women in the last century in terms of education. So she's a pretty big name when it comes to education and instructional design. Madeline Hunter, or Dr. Hunter, she was dissatisfied with how lesson plans were created, or even the preparation. How do we prepare teachers for the instructional design? So her model, which we've kind of adopted as this direct instruction model, includes 7 steps. She believed these are 7 steps that could be very informative for new teachers especially, but any teacher, in terms of how do they plan for instruction and how do they deliver the instruction in the class, in the school day. So the first part is setting the objective, writing a strong objective statement. And again, we can find those objectives usually from the state standards. I do want to let you know one thing. State standards often use generic verbs like understand, know, comprehend. So you'll need to revise that verb when you write your objective statement and include a strong action verb. But a lot of times the state standard will give you the objective. Again, just be cognizant though that the verb, you may need to revise that to a strong action verb like analyze, create, explain, describe. Okay, the next step in Madeline Hunter's direct instruction model is to provide an anticipatory set, a hook, a way to get students interested into the lesson. Then you state the objective of the lesson for the students in kid-friendly way. So for example, rather than saying students will be able to, you can say, you all will be able to do this as part of today's lesson. This lets the students know what it is that they're going to be doing. It sets the purpose. Then the next step is providing input on lesson content. And this is a teacher directed. This is what the teacher's doing. You'll be doing as a teacher. Then as you provide the lesson content or input on that lesson content, you're checking for understanding. This could be an informal assessment where you're just looking around the room, and I know you all do this already, checking who's with you, right? Who's kind of checking out the window or looking at the fly in the back of the wall, back of the classroom, that sort of thing. So checking for understanding is something we're always doing as teachers. We're wanting to make sure students are with us, and that's an informal kind of assessment. But you can also do it formally. So a quick check for understanding could be a turn and talk, where you have students talk about what you just discussed. It could be a short little quiz. It could be It can be just a quick check-in where they raise their hand to provide an answer for something, where you get a poll or survey of the class. So those are all ways to check for understanding. The next step is providing guided practice. So this is where the teacher works with the students, and it can be often in small groups where they're working on whatever content or skill the teacher has just introduced. And then the final piece of the direct instruction model is to assign independent practice. And this is where you often see your summative type of assessment for the lesson, where the summative assessment is something that they actually create or do as part of the lesson. So that's the 7-step model. And we've just kind of nicknamed it now direct instruction. There's something important, though, that you need to know about direct instruction. There's a myth around direct instruction that it's straight lecture. That's so untrue. Direct instruction model is not just you sitting as a teacher in front of the class and lecturing them. It really is based on this kind of I do, we do, and then you do. This 3-step approach to instruction, right? I do something, I show you, I discuss it as the teacher, then we do it together. And then there's this gradual release of responsibility where the students are actually doing it. So that's in direct instruction. And as part of your lesson plan, you're going to be, or this lesson plan activity, you're actually going to be creating a direct instruction lesson plan. I put some of the features of this direct instruction lesson plan. I've talked through some of this already. In this slide, you can see how the I do, we do, you do, how those 3 components are play out in the lesson plan. But there's another piece that Dr. Hunter didn't include in her 7 steps that I think is vitally important to include in direct instruction, and that's the closure. So closure is a very important part because it allows the students to reflect on what they've learned. And I always like to include an exit ticket as part of my closure to be able to check for the understanding or the mastery of the lesson objective, as well as any lesson vocabulary. Remember, the content of a lesson is often represented or reflected in the vocabulary of the lesson. So any new vocabulary that you have as part of a lesson, you'll want to introduce that in the presentation piece where you have an anchor chart, for example. Anchor charts are really great ways to introduce vocabulary, and then come back to it in the closure with an exit ticket. All right. Another piece in the direct instruction lesson plan, and for any lesson plan in this course, for any lesson plan that you will have in this course, is this component called cultural responsiveness. And this is very key. This is a very important piece of instructional design. Our public school classrooms, or any school that you're in, is becoming more and more diverse, reflecting the diversity of the United States. And it is very important as educators that we are responsive to the diversity in our classrooms, whether it's diverse in terms of culture, language, ethnicity, gender, etc. So one of the components that you'll be including in your lesson planning and your instructional design is to speak to how is it culturally responsive. Now, I wanted to add a couple quotes here. I think from very important scholars. Dr. Geneva Gay, for one, wrote a great book about cultural responsiveness. She talks about how culturally responsive teaching is using the cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conduits for teaching the students more effectively. And Dr. Zaretta Heyman talks about how cultural responsiveness is the process of using familiar cultural information to help scaffold learning. It is focused on building relationships. This is important. Communal orientation, having this cognitive scaffolding. Now notice this word scaffolding comes up a lot. That's how you are building your instruction to be able to be supportive to the students in your classroom. And also, cultural responsiveness provides a sense of critical social awareness. So what are some examples of culturally responsive classrooms? You could have a diverse classroom library where students see themselves reflected in the children's literature. They actually see themselves in the illustrations, or they hear their home language in the text that you have, or they see this represented in the environmental print on your classroom. So environmental print means, what do you have hanging around the classroom? What do you have as posters, signs, etc.? Do they see themselves reflected in that? Do they see, if you have Spanish-speaking children, for example, or bilingual or multilingual children, do they see even greetings from their home language? This is important, and can be very excellent ways of being culturally responsive. It also means having a very positive and strengths-based view of students and their families, rather than a deficit viewpoint of families and students, right? So this is what we, as teachers, this is part of the role of being a teacher, to be culturally responsive to the diversity in your classroom. So you'll be reading about ways to be culturally responsive from Brown University. They use several, or they have several different examples and ways to do that. This model here, this figure, you can read through it about other ways to be culturally responsive, and you'll see some parallels to these components of culturally responsive teaching and the Brown University reading. All right, so to wrap up, these are the readings you'll have for the module. I mentioned them already: the Understanding by Design, Chapter 1 from Wiggins and McTeague. This is where we get the backwards design model from. You'll also be reading about Understanding by Design in a nutshell, just a quick summary of what is backwards design. You'll read the mini lesson I've created about writing strong objective statements with action verbs. And then you'll read the Brown University Culturally Responsive Teaching website. So as another reminder, the assignments for this module, you'll create the direct instruction lesson plan assignment. I encourage you to look at the example that I posted on that assignment description, and also I posted a video that you can watch to help you with that assignment. Then there is the indirect instruction 5E lesson plan check-in. So I'm going to have you read through what is this indirect instruction lesson plan all about. And the check-in allows you the opportunity to answer or ask any questions you may have about the assignment. And then just again, all Module 2 assignments are due by 11:59 p.m. Monday, July 19. I do encourage you to finish early if you'd like, and I wish you a great week. Thank you.